So Pam, let me ask you, who or what or when did this language, this technique, this system get hijacked by the woo? When did it get this bad rep to the point where they look at you going, honey, please.
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, I know
Yeah.
you were fantastic in the board meeting, but you really don't believe in
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
stuff, do you?
It was
Yeah,
really quite funny.
because it's in the zeitgeist. I mean, that is when you and I think that has to do with like the daily horoscope that you read in a newspaper and like, oh, today's oh, cancers, don't walk out the house on today because today's not a good day to walk out the house. That kind of that's ridiculousness. That's
Yeah, it
absolute
is.
ridiculous. It's absolute
Yeah.
ridiculousness. But that's what's associated with astrology. So
Yeah.
when did this happen? At what point did you see in the history of astrology it went from the shamans and the mystics to the woo?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Because I despair at that. And that's why I've never, ever, ever done sun sign astrology. I mean, my heart just sinks. Because also, it's not only very superficial, but it gets back to the fatedness. Don't go out today. You know, you got Mercury
Mm-hmm,
retrograde. I mean, I was born with Mercury retrograde. Hasn't stopped me communicating so far. You know,
mm-hmm,
and I basically ignore Mercury retrograde because
mm-hmm.
I think if you have the belief system that your car's not going to start, the printer's going to jam, mail will get lost, that's what happens. That's so. In terms of if we follow recorded history, which is all we really know, 6,000 years ago, ancient Mesopotamia, it grew up through society in very academic circles. You know, the great geniuses of our time, if we look at ancient Greece, if we look at Plato, Pythagoras, they were astronomers and astrologers. The two went very much together. So it developed very much in ancient Greece, it developed all through society, and it was very much always in academia, and it was part of our university curriculum always that you studied astrology. It was part of the mystery schools. It was one of the foundational subjects in the mystery schools. In the Middle Ages, you couldn't be a doctor unless you understood astrology because they were dealing with the four humours. You might remember the four humours, and if the humours were unbalanced, it meant the person was ill and you had to rebalance the humours. That was they were taken from fire, earth, air, and water. That's astrological. So they had to be so, and really all the main monarchies in Europe had astrologers to advise them. Up until the Middle Ages, the papacy had its own astrologer. So they were held in very high position, very academic, very revered. I mean, Dr. John Dee was the last great royal astrologer to Elizabeth I. He was a huge academic, mathematician, astronomer, astrologer. He was sent as an ambassador all over Europe for Queen Elizabeth I. So, they were held in high regard. And then, really, it was the so-called Age of Enlightenment when Isaac Newton came along and said that apart from the moon, the planets couldn't exert any physical gravitational pull on the Earth, which is correct, which is true. Therefore, he said, if I can't explain this rationally, it's bunkum. And from that point on, astrology was then dismissed into back tea rooms and tea leaves and all of that kind of thing. But it started to recover really about 100 years ago, I think, with some very clever academics yet again with Dane Rudjak. Carl Jung was a hugely prolific astrologer because he knew if he did the birth charts of his clients, that gave him a shortcut to the psyche, that gave him a shortcut to diagnosis, because he could literally see the psyche of his patients. So it took him much less time to help them. And he'd ask about their dreams because he could see what was likely to come up from the archetypes. But he kept that quiet. In fact, his whole theory of archetypes, his theory of synchronicity, that both those theories were entirely astrological, entirely. But he kept it quiet because for the same reason I kept it quiet in the business world. It blows credibility. So it was really around Isaac Newton's time, the Age of Enlightenment, when you couldn't prove the physical effect of any planet beyond the moon. And if you couldn't prove it rationally, then it must be bunkum. So I think we're moving into a very different era now. And we're just on the brink of this, which is in fact, I just had a conversation 2 days ago, which was absolutely mind blowing about how it may work. But certainly, I think the planets are consciousnesses in themselves. I think they have music as a consciousness. They have a tone, they have a pitch, and some people, clever people, have been able to record that tone or that pitch from the planetary orbits. And I think we have so much to discover for lots of reasons about energy and frequency as we move into this new age. And that's when we will really get a grip on how astrology works. But it's very much part of the quantum. It's very much part of the quantum field that we are receiving quanta of information from the planets. It isn't a physical push-pull mechanical thing.
So let me ask you, there is, and we're going to start walking into we've been talking about individual maps or individual charts. I'm assuming there are charts for humanity and for the Earth that you also can see as far as where we are going as a society, where we're all going for that. Before we jump into that deep rabbit hole, there's this concept of the yugas. I'm assuming you're familiar with the yugas,
Yeah.
where there's a moment, there's 24,000 year cycle, and that humanity goes through these cycles in 24,000 years. At one point, they're enlightened or much closer to source. And then as the planets and the actual galaxies are pulled away in just general orbit of source, let's say it's being pulled back away farther from the center of the universe, if you will, or the center of source, we start to get dumber. We tend to forget. We start to get angrier. We get more violent. And you can actually see that in the cycle of humanity, where we get to a point where we're so far gone. That was the Dark Ages, where nothing moved for hundreds of years. Like nothing. We had no advancements, no nothing. But then as we start moving closer back, which is now going on the other end of it, we start to get enlightened again. We start to shift again. Our consciousness starts to rise. And that's where it seems to where we're going, because in the last 150 years, the advancements, not only in technology, but in consciousness is so vast. It's so vast, so fast. It seems to be speeding up daily now, almost. The advancements. And it's getting faster and faster and faster. I mean, I remember when I was a kid in the 70s, things pretty much stayed the same. Yeah, now we have remote controls. Cool. 2 or 3 years later, are like, oh, look, now big color TVs are getting smaller. Okay, great. But it was very slow. Now it's like every day AI is doing something new, or we're doing this or we're doing that. So that everything I just say, does that all make sense in your world?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And there's a very bit, not only, we moving past the end of Kali Yuga and towards the Golden Age, but there's so much in the cosmology as well as the astrology that says we're moving out of the old world into the new. And you're absolutely spot on, Alex. It's moving faster and faster, and it will continue to do that. It will move faster and faster and faster, because the outer planets, which kind of give us the general zeitgeist of the energy we're experiencing in society, they are moving from last year to 2026, that tight band of time, out of heavy, slow earth and water signs into air and fire. And even if you're not an astrologer, you can feel water, earth, heavy, slow, into air and fire, super quick. And even by the 25th of May, I'm not sure when this will go up, the 25th of May, 2024, we're going to have another jump into speediness. AI is going to be absolutely exponential, as you know. Jupiter moves into Gemini on the 25th of May. It's so interesting that the latest iteration from Google of AI is their latest upgrade with Gemini. Now, Jupiter is moving into Gemini, and Gemini, as you probably know, is a massive Jupiter, planet of expansion, massive data processing AI. Data processing is very much related to Gemini. I mean, it could not be more literal. So we are going to go in these huge leaps and bounds with technology. I think we need great discernment with that, and I wouldn't tell anyone what to do. They've got to make their own decisions on that. But technology, medical technology is going to be phenomenal. I think dealing with light, dealing with energy and frequency. That's going to be amazing. We're going to have anti-aging technologies, longevity technologies. We're going to be able to turn a lot of things around. We're going to be able to clean up the earth, I think, much more rapidly than we imagine. And we're going to do that with this new quality of light that's coming in for us because of the area of space that the earth is moving through currently. So, because there are two main ingredients for our evolution right now, beyond the astrology. One is, I don't know if you're aware of where peak of solar cycle 25. Mm-hmm. Okay, there are 11-year sunspot cycles that happen, all the time, 11-year sunspot cycles. We're in solar cycle 25, and everyone has a trough and a peak, and then back to a trough again. And the peak was supposed to be in 2025. The astrophysicists have had to pull it back in time pretty much to now because the number of solar flares are off the scale.
Yeah.
The magnetic shield of the Earth is thinner, more unstable. So that was like a kind of cotton wool buffer protecting the Earth from the cosmos. That's thinner and more unstable. So as the sun throws out these balls of radiation, they are more easily able to get through to us. So they are, and if I go back to 2018, we didn't have a single M-class flare. I think this year so far we've had 60. Wow. I mean, that's how in the last 10.
Is that why the what are those the Northern Lights were seen in Texas?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yes. Absolutely, because it brings in new energy to the ionosphere. And the X-class flares, I think we've had something like 13 in the last 10 days. And the solar flare scale is like a Richter scale. So M-class is 10 times the strength of a C-class, X-class is 10 times the strength of an M-class, goes up like a Richter scale. So to have that many X-class flares is pretty crazy. And yes, we're at the peak of so what that does is, on the one hand, give us lots of strange physical effects like, either extreme fatigue or insomnia. We're plugged into the mains, we can't sleep, or tinnitus or aches and pains, all kinds of, because we've never experienced really in this lifetime, I think, to this degree, this high and concentrated number of solar flares. That's how it feels anyway. Maybe it's the effect of social media too. But at the same time, we are also going through a band in space called the photon belt. We only go through that every 12,000 years, give or take 500. It's very concentrated, high frequency light. Right. Yeah, like the donut. So you've got two lots of ingredients coming at once. Now, I think the reason we're feeling the solar flare so intensely is because at the same time, even though that's an 11-year cycle, we're going through this 12,000-year cycle at the same time. So these are like two very particular sets of ingredients that there's a chap on social media called Jason Estes, he calls these stem cells for the soul. They are helping to change us from carbon to crystalline. They're reactivating our DNA. They're reactivating our 24th chromosome, which Greg Braden talks a lot about, Cryon talks a lot about at the moment, which will connect us to our multidimensionality and our expanded consciousness in a way we've never known in this lifetime, or many lifetimes. So that's the cosmology of it, which is very unique. And then you come back to the astrology, where you have many outer planets changing sign, endings, beginnings, endings, beginnings, endings, beginnings. And so those are all very clear signatures for me that we are moving into a very different era, which is really exciting, actually. I mean, don't look at the old world. That's just crumbling. Don't give life force to anything that's dying. Just create with these amazing new energies, new light which is coming in, silver diamond light. Create, because we are doing it. We are altering the quantum wave structure to create a better future for humanity. I know we are.